us. I'm Lyle Hanna with the Hanna Research Group. You're signed on today for Crisis Management for COVID-19, week 25. And we've got a lot of great things to cover today. I'm glad you've joined us. Jim Morris is back, and he's an attorney, and a lot of you know him. If you've been on here before, you know he's got a lot of things to report on. Not so much has happened. Everybody's on vacation still, but he's going to have some great things to report to us a little later on the call. We also have two special guests today. Brad Patrick, and he's spoken to us before. He's the most decorated HR person I've ever met. We're going to hear from him about what we ought to do in HR. He and Allison Pettrey have been working on this for the past week or so. And if you know Brad, you know that he was the head of HR at Valvoline and Tempur Sealy and quite a few other places over the years. Gillette and Sara Lee and Delta, and did a big stint at Frito-Lay. So a lot of great experience. And Brad, we're just delighted you're on here and going to do some things with Allison shortly. We also have Dr. Humbaugh. Craig Humbaugh is back. He's an MD and PhD, and he's the head of the health department for Lexington, Central Kentucky. And he's not going to join us till about 11:30, but he's going to give us an update on what he's seeing, and I hope you're going to find that really exciting. Autumn and Chase, glad you're back and running things. Keep us on target and track those questions, and let's just make it a great day. We're going to start out with the kind of how we get focused on mission critical things for work. I mean, how do we avoid all the crazy things that are always going on and get the really important things done? That's what Brad Patrick and Allison are going to talk about. And then we'll talk about health department update, and then we've got a good legal update for you too. So should be a fun day. Let's jump in and see if we can't take it. Brad and Allison, it's yours.
All right, well, great. Good morning, everybody. So I hope that you had a great Labor Day weekend. We're really excited to be starting off today with a session to help build a framework for thinking about how you and your teams and your organization can continue moving forward into this new normal, because as we all know, times are not normal. So HR and companies shouldn't be trying to just do things as normal. It's not business as usual. And I think we have all had that drilled into our heads by this point. So we're going to talk today about alignment, resiliency, and adaptability. And we'll also talk about some suggestions that we have for making a major impact when you're thinking about mission critical work. So HRG supported many businesses over the years who've been facing major changes or crises. So anything from potential bankruptcy to mergers and acquisitions to substantial growth spikes to even a pandemic. So throughout these changes, both positive and negative, we learned some great examples of resiliency and adaptability. Resiliency truly begins with this important step, which is getting everyone in the organization aligned with the present situation. I think we can all recognize that when some large challenge or change is present, like this pandemic, companies face new conditions. So it's really important to recognize that almost everything that you set up long ago, anything that was in place up to 8 months ago, including people's jobs and how they're structured, their accountabilities, the organization structure, even the work being done, means something different now that there are new business conditions in play. So the work companies do involve everyone and is a great place to start out with finding alignment. It's very visible how conditions have changed for a lot of different industries. So clearly restaurants, bars, movie theaters, sporting events. However, sometimes less visible are things like the impact to manufacturing facilities who are trying to deal with wild market swings with customer demand, while also trying to make sure they have enough people in place to work safely and they're meeting all of the recommended guidelines. Likewise, you can look at businesses in a broader sense, trying to figure out how to navigate the new economic conditions, because almost no industry or business has avoided running into new conditions at this point. With that, the new conditions of today also lead to uncertainty for the future. So business leaders have to assume a crisis stance and establish an aligned present state by focusing on the company work. The best way to create alignment is to address the work that everyone does, and we call that mission critical work. As HR leaders, you've got to be present with your unique perspective to help recognize what people are doing in their jobs. And basically, mission critical work means returning to the core value your company creates for customers and refocus on that. As Brad likes to say, if you are a pie making company, just focus on making pies. What does it take for your company to make the number of pies your customers want? And everything else can kind of fall to the wayside during a crisis while you're focusing on that main goal. So find this state, find this main opportunity, find this main focus for your organization, and then remap everything else around it. So you can look at jobs, expectations, number of people that you need, what resources you need to get that mission done. So in reality, so a lot of businesses change every year anyway, due to external factors or things like evolving to expand people's jobs, taking on new projects, trying to take care of the needs of their particular customers. And a lot of times organizations can suffer from trying to take on too much to fix everything. The old trying to do more with less that we are all familiar with. So trying to do more with less is great when you are trying to find productivity, but especially in a crisis situation is dangerous and demotivating and even exhausting. So it may create feelings of burnout and hopelessness in your staff. It may even create feelings of burnout and hopelessness in yourself if you don't kind of plan to face these new conditions head on. So Brad, I know you've had a ton of experience with resilient companies and how they've learned to focus on mission critical work. Care to share some of those?
Yeah, well said, Allison. I've worked a great deal with organizations in crisis. So when I, get invited, I show up if they're dealing with some type of crisis, like Allison said, bankruptcy, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, things like that. But even growth too, growth. And what happens, it just changes the conditions, as she said. So the real idea is to simplify and to get back to the basics again. So for an organization to eventually become adaptable and responsive, you got to get everybody to the same place again. And one thing that's always surprising to me is when I visit businesses, you have people running around trying to do everything that they were doing in the past. And what's happened when businesses run, and you all know this, that you as time goes on, you create additional projects and you have customers who want a little extra things from you. You have reports, you have meetings that get started. So really the focus, as we've laid out here, is to kind of stop, get the leadership team together. And that's where Allison mentioned that HR has this really great visibility across the whole organization, to step back and let's look at what we're doing. Let's figure out the work, because everybody was running around trying to figure out which way is up. It's what you have to do to get alignment is to create the focus of it. And as we like to say, if your business is making pies, make pies. But you have to also be aware that you have IT projects and meetings and reports and things like that. It's time to reevaluate and check those out. So as HR professionals with this unique perspective, what you're really doing is stepping back and helping your managers understand what's the most important work to do, and then to say that out loud. To be very practical with you, I have a lot of businesses I go to and they say, Brad, my team is overwhelmed. They're just overworked. We're just doing too many things. What do you think? And my loving response is usually said, I think their manager's failing. And what I mean by that is the manager's job is to determine the amount of work. That's why we call them managers. And as an HR professional, you have a grand opportunity to help them manage better, which is a great part of our role in HR, is to decide what work is going to get done. Now, starting at a very basic level, I would suggest at a very business level, I should say, a very strategic level, is first step back and identify what products you're making. And a lot of times if you have a pie making company or a financial services company or a bank, many times you have expanded the number of services, number of products that you sell. So one of the first things that I've done when I work with businesses is we go look and say, how are you interacting with your customer? How many products do you have? Is there a way for us to simplify this? Because of the cost challenges that exist, we've may had to let some people go, or we're refocusing people, or the consumers aren't as aggressive. So your big first area is let's step back and figure out what we're doing. A lot of times I've worked with businesses. I worked in the fresh bakery business where we had over 11,000 SKUs, storekeeper units, 11,000 different products. and we were having some financial problems. So we had to cut that back to right around 6,000 projects and eventually products, and then 4,000 products. When I worked at Delta Airlines and 9/11 happened, when we got back flying again, we just focused on getting people from point A to point B. And all of those projects that we're taking on and all those things that happened, we had to cut those back. The other thing is you also have to look at your customers. And this is never something that people like to do or think about, but sometimes you need to fire some customers. Especially if you serve a lot of different customers out there, sometimes you recognize that your smaller customers have the most needs and the most demanding part of it. So I would step back and decide who you're going to serve. And I know that's a very hard discussion. You've already limited products, maybe you've limited services. Now you may be limiting customers. Now your customer relationships are important. So there are obviously strategic ways to handle that, but that is another way to pull back. Have you looked across your business and determine what type of products can we reduce? Can we reduce the number of flavors, the type of packaging, the number of services, how far we wander? And then with the customers, some of your small customers, you may have to transition somewhere else. And then as we mentioned earlier, IT projects. A lot of people are looking to improve their technology, and right now may not be the time to do it. What Allison talked about is getting people back to alignment. This is showing resiliency to get everybody realigned. So get everybody back to the place that makes sense. Look at your meetings. What type of meetings do you have? Are there ways to reduce meetings, stop meetings? What type of reporting do you have? Do you have a lot of reports that maybe you can do without? A lot of businesses work really hard to close their books every month. It's a hard challenge, but sometimes if you want to create more time for yourself, maybe closing your books on a quarterly basis, if you're comfortable with that, would be another example. But you have to look up and down, and you can't go solve this one employee at a time. You have to step back, create the alignment about what's the most important work, and then go to individuals on a more one-to-one basis to help them focus on it. So if you're a manager of people and your team is overwhelmed, they're overworked, they're confused, this is where HR can come and put your arm around a manager, supervisors, and help them understand that their role is to simplify the work. It's to get the resources in the work match. If you can see my hands, your job as a manager is to make your resources and your work equal. And if one gets out of balance, that's what managers do to respond to that. Does that help, Allison?
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you, Brad. And several weeks ago, you'd mentioned on, I think it was this weekly call, that a crisis could be an incredible business opportunity as well. Because once a company reacts with resiliency, they set themselves up to be adaptable. And returning to a clear and present state and having an aligned workforce allows the organization to opportunistically select changes to better perform and compete. Is that the point you were making?
Yeah, no, I did mention that, and I do think, I still believe it's very true that now that the business conditions are changed, it's an incredible opportunity. Obviously, when I say that, the opportunities is, I don't mean to be opportunistic by taking advantage and cheering for this great pandemic we're having, but I'm really saying that the pandemic's happened. Now this is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And the words that we've shared with you so far about alignment and resiliency is regathering everybody to a core and common place. Now you can be adaptable. And I think it's very important that we are clear by saying that adaptability comes with, creating a little bit more of a command and understanding of your environment. But now that you're in this place, hopefully you've taken work away, you've stopped work, you've delayed work. Maybe you have some great IT projects that next year might be a better time, or 2 years from now, better time, but you're going to focus on things right now. And this is where businesses can run in and fill the gap of new services that they might be able to offer. So maybe you've gotten rid of some lesser services, or you've made your client group tighter, smaller, you fired some customers. Now maybe you can offer different services or varied services. So this is where very opportunistic businesses jump in with a crisis that you can't control, and you're very focused on selecting the work to create new opportunities for yourself and your business and for people. Some of this has come from even trying to retain your team. Some organizations believe that while this crisis is going on, they've worked very, very hard to retain their team. So this might be an opportunity to get some training done. if your organization can afford it, maybe some community work. These are the areas to be very opportunistic and be very deliberate. And obviously for, you know, all the conditions of resiliency, alignment, and this adaptability to exist, we're going to ask you to tap into your leadership as well, and how you communicate and how you pull people along and how you keep them informed. And those are all the things that help businesses with as we work through that. So, but this is something we just wanted to get across to everybody, that there's a first reaction is most businesses run and try to do everything that they're doing. This may even include doing things like compliance, and compliance is important, and you always want to be in compliance. And as I say this, Jim's jaw dropped and hair falls out and goo comes out of his ears. But the idea is sometimes what you have to do is put things on a longer term scale and maybe delay a few things. Obviously, if you get an audit and gets into trouble, then you got to drop everything and change again. But this is the adaptability that your managers and leaders need to be correcting. Look at Jim just disappeared on me and came. But the idea, once again, is focus on getting back to mission critical work.
Okay, so we've seen a lot of businesses at HRG that have worked to kind of adapt. So things like businesses that do office sanitizing, obviously they're taking off, expanding their services, but we have a lot of our companies who have kind of adapted their core offerings to add a COVID-related line. So a marketing company that starts helping their clients think through COVID-related marketing strategies or new products or things that they may need to offer to kind of respond to this new business environment. Do you have any examples that you've seen that you want to share with us?
Well, just as you work through this, you cut out of me a little bit there, so I didn't hear everything. But just, you know, revisiting your main priorities, getting back to the basics is important. You know, the other thing to add into this too, now you'll actually strengthen your own culture. Your culture will get stronger because the openness, the communication, all the people that work in your business will look at their leaders, their managers, and say, you're recognizing what the situation is, and you're simplifying my life. The normal reaction, and I often call it cafeteria theory of life, everybody complains about the food, but no one's ever starved to death, is the concept where a lot of people they look for a common place to be aligned by finding the negative aspects of your work environment. You have an opportunity to create a positive aspect of alignment by stopping work, by being very clear and declaring, we're not doing this anymore, or we're going to stop this weekly report, or we're going to stop this monthly meeting, and we're going to shift to other more important things. And so those are all very important aspects of where we are right now, is to do that. And if you just think about these experiences with when 9/11 happened, or when companies go into bankruptcy, or when there's a merger and acquisition, one of the phrases that comes up in business when the strategic level is do no harm. And what that basically means is make sure you protect the business and the core things you're doing. Just recognize that businesses always slip into doing other things along the way. And what you're really trying to get to is focus on the basics, the things that you do to create value and to protect your team and to get that alignment.
Okay. Well, good. Well, if anybody on the call has an example of anything that they've done, any way they've adapted, anything cool that they have explored in order to kind of show their resiliency or adaptability, we'd love for you to plug it into the chat. We'd love to share that with everybody, or when we open it up at the end to talk, we'd love it if you would chime in. But so we at HRG have really enjoyed helping our clients to refocus on their core work, and we encourage HR and business leaders to go through the same process in their own organizations during this time. We do have kind of 3 main suggestions that we like to give people in order to make the greatest impact. So the first one is, when you're thinking through the mission critical work, be positive and solutions oriented. Clearly, as we've discussed, there's a lot of negativity in play, a lot of stress that comes out of these types of crisis situations. So managers and employees you really need your perspective, not only the information that you can provide to the table, but the encouragement and the ideas and the positive outlook. Basically, it will be really appreciated by people when you're trying to help them determine next steps, and you can help to realign people in their jobs. And as Brad said, manager role is to manage workload and resources. Make sure that you're supporting your managers, and make sure you're also reiterating to them what their purpose is, and not just trying to take some of the things off of their plate that should probably fall to them. We see a lot of hand-holding that sometimes needs to go back to them so that they can actually deal with the issue and not just cover it up by having someone else do it for them. You need to refocus on the core work. So, and Brad, feel free to chime in on any of these if I'm skipping anything that you want to reiterate, but.
Lead the way, keep going.
All right, so refocus on the core work. So again, helping people be better managers and leaders, revisiting the priorities both at the company and the team level, ensuring that you're continuing to clarify accountability and manage the expectations and workload in this new environment and as you restructure things. And then you can evaluate work using the stop, start, continue, and delay method. So Brad talked a little bit about some of the reports that you can maybe delay, some of the things projects that you can stop for a while, or some new services that you can start offering. So it's kind of an easy way to think through any project on your plate. Should I stop, start, continue, or delay this? Then once you have refocused on the work, make sure that you're engaging people and identifying the opportunities to improve the business and their jobs. So basically, when people are motivated, even if there is uncertainty, it can help reduce that. It can help reduce the feelings of stress. It can ensure that your people stay committed. So even as you get these big curveballs thrown at you, they decide to be along for the ride. People will continue to work hard and be better team members when they are clear on their expectations of their job. And then companies clearly can also do better work when their staff is really engaged and not stressed out, and you're not constantly replacing people and having a revolving door of talent. But being in a crisis doesn't mean that you stop doing the feedback and development of your people. It's really important to note that you still do need to think through those processes. You just need to do them differently. It still needs to happen, but you need to think about what are the most important parts of the process that are going to be basically adding value to the team and adding value to the business without just adding more work to people during the crisis stage. So our final quote to live by as well is, you can do anything, but not everything. So very important words, I think, for all of us to remember during this time.
Great points.
All right. Any
Hey,
questions?
Brad, this is Jim Morris. I just, thanks for the shout out.
Well, I could visibly see you a little bit concerned that this HR guy tells everybody that compliance is great, but sometimes you can't do everything today.
No, you know what? I was actually I think this is a good opportunity. I just wanted to share, I'm actually using that quite a bit right now because, I think I shared a while back when you were on the last time that I give a legal and then I give a business advice, and sometimes they're not the same.
Right.
And during
Great
this
point.
time in particular, if you tried to comply with everything that our current state, local, and federal government is jamming down everybody's throats and trying to force you to do things, and the amount of regulatory changes day to day, it would be impossible. And the one thing I've said many times is right now, this is going to be really awesome for me, and nobody, don't throw this back at me if you give me a call. Legal should be one of your lowest priorities right now. And I think I shared that with Lyle when we started this 26 weeks ago was, look, the way I look at this is I'm going to be out there just giving guidance. People are not going to need my help for a long time because nobody's wanting to sue anybody right now. You can't even get to the courthouse. You don't want to spend extra money. We're not going to redo all of our policies. But there are certain things you have to do, and this mission critical is really awesome to talk about. I'm glad you guys brought it up because that applies to legal as well. I mean, you and I, we like to joke about the difference between, the frozen by the amount of legal that we have to do. And I'm a big fan of the combined business, HR, legal, and not just throwing the legal out there. It gets really old to hear them say, oh, you need a policy for that. Well, you have to have policy for the bathroom and the flushing of the toilet and all the steps you have to take. And, yeah, if you read the all the labels on anything you buy, it's all because an attorney somewhere a long time ago sued somebody and somebody had to pay money. So I get frustrated by it just as much as everybody else, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because, believe it or not, I was agreeing with you. I was not falling out of my chair, and whatever news you had coming out of my ear was something else. Don't worry about it.
Good, yeah, great comments, Jim. It is. I mean, that we've worked with a lot of businesses, and they're trying to keep all the balls in the air. And the message that Allison and I have really, it is about being focused and then choosing the right things. And your workforce will cheer for you when you come up and say, this monthly meeting is, we're not going to have it, or this report is going to go to a quarterly. They're going to cheer for you, and you're going to build trust, and you're going to strengthen your culture because they're going to look at you because you're being very practical, and you're making it easier to go through this crisis. So anyway, that's our support and our advice for you. Obviously, we're available to help any business. You're going to talk about it. You could really make your business stronger right now, and it's a great opportunity to take, right? Because you can't change the pandemic, so make your business stronger while you do it.
Thanks, Brad. And I failed to mention it. While Brad is doing some consulting now, he also is the brand new executive in residence at the University of Kentucky Gatton School of Business. And people might not have recognized you from the photo I put up front to your new look now. And I guess I'm going to have to get a new photo for you.
Yeah, this is me taking an opportunity to try this out. So I'm being opportunistic as well. But yes, at UK, I'm lecturing in the master's program and working with the doctoral candidates. And since I keep shooting my mouth off about change management and transition, that's what I'm teaching at Gatton this year. So
cool.
I have to actually live up to all my words at this point.
And Allison runs HR for a bunch of companies. She actually is head of our outsourcing organization, and you know a bunch of them, nice companies all around the area. So you've got a lot of experience in seeing this kind of day to day, and people have got to find new ways to focus on the critical. That's the only thing that's saving us right now. Hey, I noticed Tiffany Cardwell put in a comment on here for everybody that, gosh, this communications is so critical right now when so many people are working from home. You can't just get them around the table in the conference room and hash it all out. So this kind of constant communication, I know we're sure seeing that as really important, and I suspect others are too. You can't over communicate at this point between your team to keep everybody focused. Any final thoughts? I don't think there are any questions that have come in.
We do have one question that
Let's hear it. Okay.
That I'm happy to kind of respond to. I don't know how helpful my response will be yet, but somebody else on the team may have some things. So the question was, do you have any suggestions for training or coaching platforms in the new virtual environment? And my answer is that we're testing a couple with clients, but I don't feel good enough about the results to pitch them here or to recommend someone else use them. But I'm happy to get back to you individually once I do. But somebody else on the team may have some experience with training or coaching platforms they want to share.
I was looking over at Chase to see if any comments. Right now, the first thing we would do is we would look at the business. We would talk about what your business needs and what the gaps are, and obviously to help us get more clarity to it. There's a number of things that can be done just around role clarity and people clarity and business clarity is a substantial thing that people can start now. So those are homegrown, and just having a key leader that has a lot of thoughts running through their head and make decisions. I would invest time in helping people understand where the business is now is a big part of it. But there are a number of great platforms out there if there are things you need specifically, supervisor training and change management and things like that. There's a lot of things that we could look at. The work that I do with Hannah Resource Group, I love working with this team, obviously with Allison and all the outsourcers and helping them diagnose and figure out what are the good actions to take. And then I partner with Chase over there to help businesses think about more structured and formal organizational development activities there too. So, Chase has a tool belt full of different training that he can offer, and I'm sure he can refer from other experiences as well. But I would encourage you to make sure that you've, sometimes you just got to talk it out and set up small formal/informal sessions with your teams to figure out where you are, because things are very up in the air right now. And working to get back to the present and understanding where everybody is a fabulous time to build the strength and the trust and the awareness within your business is one idea.
And we got someone chimed in while we were talking to that they use the Bridge platform, and it seems very good. We also had someone say that they use Zoom to do DISC training for supervision and management. Everything.
A fun exercise I've done with businesses in major crisis is to get a group of people together and have them draw a map of how the company actually works and who hands work off to who and what. And you will be surprised how enlightening that is to people. I've asked top executive teams to do that and have found that they struggle mightily in where all the pieces fit together. So if you get a small group of people and you can get a whiteboard on a video conference or a wall, and some of our buildings have walls you can write on, and have a group of people just put your business together and the clarity of that and what does it mean and who do they talk to and what are important things. Finding that alignment right now in this crazy time is a great thing to do to really create the resiliency and hopefully the agility to refocus and to address your most pressing needs right now.
Okay, looks like Dr. Humbaugh hadn't been able to join us yet. So I tell you what, why don't we pick him up when he does sign in. And Jim, if you want to go ahead and start on your report, let's do that.
Okay, so just let me know when he joins and we'll stop where we are. So a few things that are going on, let me just walk you through them. First of all, a couple of things on the remote training and remote workplace Zoom meeting. I think I've talked about it a little bit. I just want to remind you all, no, I'm not talking about all the policies and procedures, but I do want to just give you a hint, which is the Zoom meeting or Teams meeting is a new area for people to potentially harass other people, sexually, racially, things like that. And the reason is, and I'm seeing some of this, that's why I'm telling you, you start to have a virtual happy hour because you're trying to have the camaraderie together with your employees and trying to do good things for them. Somebody starts to drink and has just a little bit too much and starts to talk about Susie in the room or so-and-so, and things get out of hand. The drinking part of it, if it is a sponsored event, something that the employer encouraged, you could end up with a harassment claim. So it sounds bizarre, but it's real, and it's one of those things as HR people, you really need to keep track of the fact that, hey, you are having a meeting. If it's a business-sponsored meeting, you need to put limits on people, you need to put some confinement on people, or you need to not have it at all. We've talked about it in different functions. It's great to have a party like that, BYOB or whatever you're going to do, but then there are some pitfalls just to be careful of. That's where we're talking about the need for some kind of instruction, safeguarding policies and procedures. And no, I don't want to get manuals this thick that you're having to share with your employees, but that is the new water cooler. It is the new area where things can be done. And again, the other thing I'm going to throw in is be careful about NLRB type things, the water cooler coming in again, the concept, you can't be, as an employer, you can't be monitoring your employees' social media, you can't be engaging in trying to encourage or discourage them from doing certain things because you could be anti-union. So throw those things out there because it is a whole new normal and a whole new world. All right, so, and Lyle, just interrupt me if we need to stop for the doctor, and I'll come back to it. President's executive orders, we talked a little bit about this since August the 8th. Just a little quick review. Executive order on the payroll tax is 6.2%. Payroll tax for anyone earning less than $104,000. For those that don't know how to do math, that's $4,000 every 2 weeks. That's what those individuals were entitled to retain temporarily the 6.2 payroll tax. It was designed as a way for the president to use the authority he has, which is extraordinarily limited. Everyone loves to get angry about why he didn't shut down certain states and why he didn't do certain things. Politics aside, go back and have a civics lesson, because the governors control their states. The president cannot shut down a state. He can declare a national emergency, or he has to allow each of the states to do it. It's why Florida has a different policy right now about masks and about social distancing and about businesses being open than does New Jersey and New York. Downtown New York, you can't go to a restaurant still, they're closed. Florida, everything's open. It's all governor-oriented and local government-oriented. But what the president can do is defer tax collection. He is the executive level. Executive means execute. Execute means if the Congress says you must pay taxes, which is the legislative body, the president must execute, i.e. collect taxes and hand them over. What he has said is we will defer the taxes on these people until the end of the year so that they have a holiday from payment. It does not mean forgiveness. So this is not the action I was hoping for, but on September 4th, the House, Mr. Larson, Democrat from Connecticut, that's the decon, and Mr. Larson introduced a Save Our Social Security Now Act, which it is designed to try to overturn the president's payroll tax holiday executive order. He won't get it done. It will pass the House. It won't pass the Senate. However, they also are proposing a Congressional Review Act to overturn the IRS guidance we talked about last week. I had told you all that I thought of all the things the president did, this would be the one that could be challenged, along with potentially the $300 federal unemployment, but nobody wants to do that because that's money into unemployed people's pockets and nobody wants to lose their vote. So the one that they are challenging is this one, and they're trying to get it set aside. Schumer and Wyden in the Senate demanded the Government Accountability Office to issue a directive as to whether this all happened on Friday, so I'm letting you know about it now. If it is a rule, then Congress has oversight and they could issue a joint resolution, House, Senate, to declare that guidance is a rule and is not appropriate. Again, that will never pass under the current House and the current Senate. The House will pass that one, the Senate won't agree to it, so it seems like we're wasting a whole lot of time while they're all on vacation. That's why down at the bottom I made the comment, it is a waste of time. It's a waste of energy and resources. The old House and Senate used to pass on this type of thing. They would do some kind of resolution objecting to whoever the majority is and then move on. Now it seems like we're going to have hearings and investigations over whether or not the IRS had the authority to follow an executive order that he certainly has the ability to defer on taxes. So nothing happened on that other than there's a whole lot of things you're going to see, and I wanted you to understand because last week my recommendation was don't collect it. That's because at the beginning of the year, let me make sure I'm clear. I'm perfectly fine with you collecting it. If you have an employee that understands, hey, I'm going to give you 6.2% extra money right now, but at the beginning of 2021, you're going to owe it back. I would get that in writing, because the other thing that the IRS said was if that employee is no longer employed, you can make, quote, other arrangements to collect that money from the employee. What that means to me is you're going to have to go sue that employee to collect the money from them because you ultimately are responsible for paying that double in the first quarter of 2021. I see it being a nightmare. I do believe eventually this is all going to be part of an act that gives money back to employees and employers like it should have done 2 months ago. They're not doing it right now because we have a little thing called an election coming up in November, and nobody wants to move either way. They all want to point the finger at each other. So that's the executive order. Congress, vacation is complete for senators at least. This is my sarcastical comment of the day. Yes, Congress is back in session today. The senators were required to come back because they've had 3.5 weeks off. Whoops, I have no idea what just happened. There we go. Congress decided to go ahead and take another week off, so they'll be back on the 14th. I could make some sarcastic comments about what they're doing, but we'll just leave that alone. Reading the tea leaves, I don't see any quick fix. I saw yesterday Pelosi in California made some comments about what they would and would not do. They will not agree to anything short of $2.5 trillion in relief. If it's anything else, they won't even look at it. And that was her comment. Senate is going to do a stopgap measure this week, along with making sure that the government doesn't shut down. For those that don't realize, they run on a fiscal October 1st. So if they don't pass a resolution, they don't have the money to run. Quite frankly, the way it's running right now might be better for everybody if they're not running, at least the congressional side of things. But the Senate intends to pass, hopefully, this week, not my political comment, theirs, $500 billion stopgap measure, $300 per week unemployment, $105 billion for schools, funding for testing and for the Postal Service, with a business liability shield that I've been begging for each state to have as well. That's basically if you followed all of the COVID things and someone can somehow sue you, you don't have to defend it. You can pull out the shield and say, can't sue me just because somebody got COVID. House is demanding, I put 2.2 trillion, that's a document that I saw this morning. Last night I saw the 2.5 trillion, $600 per week for unemployment, zero business shield, full postal service, several other things in there, as well as some things that have zero to do with COVID. They want immigrant release from jail. Everyone who's in jail who's an illegal immigrant gets out. No borders, some other things that just are not going to pass. But that is where we are right now. So okay, he's still not on. Just double checking.
Yeah.
All right, CDC Continues Daily Updates. If you haven't had a chance to look at these, don't waste your time. I'm going to show you here in just a second, but we get about 8 to 10 a day. School operational considerations. I'm not going to go through it, but if it's important to you, it's on the screen. If it's really important, you can go look at it. Sick student is just like a sick worker. But I mean, they're releasing these every day, and it's hard to keep up with, but a couple of these are in fact critical. I skipped all of the ones that had nothing to do with this. There's one on here that's a nightmare. I'm going to drag it on the screen for you to look at. Avoiding workplace violence. The reason why this one is important to all of you is the CDC has weighed in and is quoting OSHA. Once OSHA gets involved with workplace violence, then you have to follow the guidance that's issued. Otherwise, if somebody gets verbally attacked, physically attacked, feels intimidated or threatened, you can be held responsible because it is your obligation under OSHA to have a safe workplace environment. So they came out on the 1st of September with a new guidance quoting OSHA. CDC is not the law, but OSHA is. So if OSHA has weighed in and said you are responsible for assuring that your employees are not subject to threats in the workplace, and you might be sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? Basically, what I'm talking about is retail environment, school children, children with parents walking into schools. If anyone starts to threaten an employee, you have to have protective measures. Now, one of the things they talked about is having 2 employees so that you have 2 people tag teaming, mask compliance, things like that. Don't physically touch a customer, employee, student but you have to continue to try to encourage them, social distancing, masking, so on and so forth. Ultimately, ironically, it says if you can't get them to wear a mask and they're being belligerent, let them go. So I don't know what that does, because there are other laws that say it's your obligation as a restaurant and you can be shut down if they don't wear the mask. But then there's CDC guidance now adopting OSHA that says don't confront anybody and don't let it escalate. If you need to see things on that, there's a whole big long descriptor. It is important because you're stuck with it. This next one is bizarre. We're going to take the test together. So I'm going to put it up on the screen so you can see where it is. And after this, we can talk to the doctor if he's on. This will be a good segue if he's on. All right, so you should see on your screen, sorry, I'm going to look to the left, coronavirus self-checker. I'm going to close it. Here is the new one. This just came out on September 2nd. My pointer's not going to work, so there's your coronavirus self-checker. So let's take this little test together. So it pops up with somebody's name on here. Her name's Clara. She's going to be taking my test. So am I in the United States? Yes. What state am I in? I am in Kentucky. You'll understand why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for myself. It's really quick. Life-threatening symptoms, I don't have any. You feel free to read yours for yourself, so I'm going to put no. What's my age? I am between, all right. I'll put a real age in here. I do not feel ill, so I'm going to answer that. In the last 2 weeks, did I care for or have close contact? Nope. Sounds like I'm feeling okay. Now, then the other one is, if I go back up here though, and I change one answer, sorry, I have to go back through it, and I want you to see this because it depends on your state too, but I'm gonna put Kentucky, and I'm answering for myself. I don't have any of these. I will put this age. I'm not feeling ill. I don't know. Did I have close contact with someone diagnosed? If I put I don't know because I've been to a grocery store, I've been out to eat. No, I've not been to a nursing home. No, I haven't volunteered. The guidance, this is our national CDC guidance is I need to stay home for 14 days if I don't know whether I've been exposed to someone in the last 14 days. And the point of this nightmare for me is this. Let me put this back up. I'm going to close that out. That's a self-guided answer. I don't need to be tested, but I do need to stay home for 14 days. So as an HR professional, or anyone who owns a business, this guidance now from the CDC, in my opinion, is a nightmare because it will provide support for anyone who is avoiding work. So if you have an employee who answers that they're unsure as to whether they've been exposed to anyone in the last 2 weeks, just because it doesn't go into any detail, it did go into, hey, did you go to a hospital? No. Did you volunteer at a hospital? No. Quarantine, 14 days. That literally is our Center for Disease Control guidance right now with a self-guided tour. If you answer one question as I don't know, then you are now recommended to quarantine. Then you go back, and I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but if you go back to all my guidance, the FFCRA guidance is if you've been recommended by a healthcare professional to quarantine, you can get paid to stay at home and quarantine. Well, you just got through with a test that I ran from the Center for Disease Control from the United States that literally gave an answer. And I did it this morning not realizing that there was an issue that was on that one question of I don't know. I legitimately this morning answered that question, I don't know, because You know, I've had family members that have traveled and now they're back, and I've gone to the grocery store, and so I don't know if I've been exposed. And I did not know that I was setting myself up for a 14-day quarantine. So your employees can answer that question, print that off, send you the answer, and go, look, Clara just told me I need to stay home. She works for the CDC. Her name popped up. I took the test, and it says, stay home. I see that as being a nightmare. It can now be used. They don't even have to go anywhere. They can answer questions on a self-help screen and manipulate the answers into what they need for not coming or coming into work, either one. Very disappointed because that should have had a whole lot more questions. Hey, why do you feel that way? Were you casually in a store? Were you literally hugging somebody that was very sick and had a fever of 103? Ask some other questions. Don't just all of a sudden tell me I have to be 14-day quarantine. The irony is then if I tested positive, I'm only on a 10-day quarantine or 24 hours without a fever, but because I answered that I wasn't sure whether I'd been around someone, I have a 14-day quarantine. I'm going to take that to my employer and see if I can get off the next 14 days. I may not be here next Monday, just letting you know. Restaurants and bars, they do have brand new guidance out for restaurants and bars. I know we have a lot on here. They also had a whole lot of updates for business worker safety and support and hotels. Although when I looked at these guys, I tried my best to figure out what exactly are you updating. And not one part of it looked new to me. In fact, I think I've commented before, I can't believe people are being paid to put these together when it basically boils down to reduce mixing of people, modify your workspace or your retail space, limit crowding, and figure out ways to do this without having people, whether it's a restaurant or other, to have not very many people in the building. I keep looking for where are they changing it, but they're not telling us what they're changing. They literally are just saying, hey, here's new guidance. And then when you click on the different pieces, this was last updated in April, last updated in June, or sometime in August, and I can't figure out why they keep doing more updates. Last thing on this page, OSHA. OSHA came out with a wonderful mask guidance for hot and humid conditions. They even split it out into hot and humid inside and hot and humid outside. The difference? None. The guidance, ask them to wear their mask, try to get them to acclimate to it. Have some other things that will help them cool off. Maybe, the little handkerchiefs around their neck that'll help them cool off. And if they can't do it, remind them of their social distancing, keep them 6 feet apart, and have them take their mask off. I read the two side by side, and I tried to figure out why did you have inside hot and humid and outside hot and humid. Honestly, no difference. I think they want to publish more things so it looks like they're doing something, and it helps us justify why the government needs to run starting October 1st. All right, this is the last slide. This is the last slide. If you want me to run through this real quick, Lyle, and then he can take over, or do you need him to run it now?
Dr. Humbaugh, do you have a few more minutes time-wise, or?
I really need to be. I've got another meeting at 12 noon. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead and go to you, and then we'll bounce back to that.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm on such a tight schedule.
No, this is our fault. We didn't give you all
No, it's
instructions. But we're glad you're here, and I'll skip the introduction. You're awesome. How about that?
Okay. I just wanted to give you a rundown on what's happening in terms of cases locally at the here in Lexington. So, we'll have surpassed our 6,500th case. So we've had 6,500 cases since the pandemic began in Lexington residents that have been reported to us. Most recently, we started to reach a plateau, and then the colleges started to open. So we started to then see an upward turn in our numbers. And so for the last couple of weeks or so, if you look at our numbers, which are on lfchd.org, you'll see that about half of all of our new cases now are in college students. We've had around 1,000 cases in UK students just in the last month alone, since August 3rd. Fortunately, most of these folks are very mildly ill or not symptomatic at all. This is what we expect in this population. We've had no hospitalizations and no deaths in this younger age population in UK students or in other university students. So that's good news. Unfortunately, though, we still see increasing numbers of deaths in older age groups. So 61% of our 61 deaths are in folks that are 75 years of age or older. So that's our high risk population, along with people who are a bit younger who have chronic illnesses, which is most of us in Kentucky. So we are going to be a high risk state for this particular illness. We've had about 1% of our cases are deaths. Our hospitalizations have pretty much leveled off. We have about 50 people in the hospital at any given time now. It is much higher than it was earlier on in the pandemic in March and April. On the other hand, we haven't seen much of a change in terms of total number of people who are in the hospital on any given day due to COVID-19. Here in Lexington that are Lexington residents, that's remained relatively stable, which is good because we want our sickest patients to be able to have a bed and be able to have caregivers to take care of them and to have a ventilator if necessary. Average age of our COVID-19 positive patients has gone down, needless to say, with the advent of more students and surveillance testing at the universities here in town. So that's what's going on there. In terms of long-term care facilities, over half of our deaths have been from some type of congregate living facility, and we continue to see cases in long-term care facilities, and these are probably the most concerning because this is a very vulnerable population. You've heard that there are cases at the detention center, and I think they're doing as good as you possibly can do when you have a difficult situation where there are a lot of people living in the same building close to each other. And so they're doing surveillance testing and other types of testing that are targeted on a regular basis. So that's going on as well. There's a lot really happening here in Lexington. We have over 50 folks who are part of our quote contact tracing team. Contact tracing is really, that's the generic term, but it starts out with a case investigation of the case. We first find out about the case from the tester or from the doctor or wherever the test got done. And then we do a call to that person. We do a thorough case investigation, identify contacts, then our contact tracers call the contacts. People are isolated appropriately and quarantined appropriately based on that information. And then we also have a group of people who call the people who are positive, the cases who are positive every single day, to determine at what point they're able to be released from isolation. So there's a whole group of folks that are under the kind of the banner of contact tracing who are every day working on the new cases that come in, and we're starting to average about 100 new cases every day. So that plateau of cases, of numbers of cases, keeps going up here in Lexington. So questions for me, next 5 minutes or so, if I'm happy to take them.
I've got one for you,
Sure.
if I could. This is Jim Morris. I'm going to put on the screen a document. It's not yours, but I think you had something to do with the accuracy of Fayette County, and I wanted to find out if you know anything about the others. Like, this is the college where you're talking about the amount of. Do you have this in front of you? Can you see it? So, like, Fayette County, University of Kentucky, they have 601 cases. but then Louisville right below it has a total of 0, a total recovered of 6, and the total ever positive of 8. And so it's clear that, you know, Louisville's the same size, metropolitan. There's no way that they have no active cases. And yet, do you have any input or any idea as to why different colleges are not reporting? The same thing goes with the, you know, I've got the K through 12, Fayette County again, to your credit, I believe, has a lot of them listed. Now, Jefferson finally listed 58, but a lot of these are woefully out of date or don't appear to be accurate at all. I didn't know whether you knew where Kentucky's getting that information and why.
I can really only just speak to our jurisdiction. I will say there will be a difference in the numbers here versus what's on our website, because what is published on our website is data about, let's say, UK students who either are from here or they choose to isolate here. Now, that's the majority of UK students, but not all of them. A minority of them may choose to go to their parents, for instance, or some other place to isolate. And if so, then we transfer that case to that other jurisdiction. But I can't really speak to the data from other places. I just know how we're doing it here in Lexington. We're trying hard to keep up with the data,
right,
be as transparent as possible about what's going on here in terms of case rates and deaths, and also the demographics of our cases. So you can look at all that: ages, races, ethnicities, etc.
Well, we appreciate you all keeping up with it. I think Jim's point here is that it seems like nobody else is. That is the official Kentucky site that he's showing you.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to go back to the health department and ask.
I appreciate how much you're doing. That was the other thing, was to show people last week and this week your numbers, whatever you're doing. And I was going to pull yours up and dump it in there too from your website, but I could, doing it so quick, I didn't find it. But I was going to drag yours over. Your numbers are a little different than those, but you're definitely up to date versus what it looks like some of the others not. We do have a question since I already interrupted.
One more thing about University of Louisville, not to throw them under the bus too much, but University of Kentucky started testing on August 3rd when students started to come back to the campus. I don't think that was a decision that University of Louisville made. And if you test, then you're going to find out about asymptomatic cases, and that
right.
would be one reason why, you know, we're seeing more in that population. But I haven't been keeping up with the University of Louisville, so I don't know for sure.
So this is one of yours, right? Very informative for those that don't have it. I much appreciate how in-depth your statistics are. There was a question, since I've already kind of jumped in and asked you one. I'd throw you one more if you have time for it. All right, so this one was to you early on before you got on the call. It says, we're a small company. When an employee needs to be tested, it's a bit of a scramble to figure out where to get tested. Also, we had an employee who was tested on August 28th, but they've yet to receive results. Do you have any guidance or suggestions?
I would urge them to go to the mayor's website. I don't have that. It's the city's website. They have a list, I think if you Google it, of testing sites that are available on any given week. And especially the testing sites that they sponsor, they're through Blue Water Diagnostics does them. Those are ones that generally, if you get tested there, first of all, they use PCR testing, which is the gold standard. And secondly, normally they can, the results are usually back within 72 hours. So I agree that it doesn't help much if you get tested or somebody gets tested at your business and then 10 days later they find out the results. I think it's an exception rather than the rule, but there are places that, so yeah, this is, thank you for pulling that up. So this week, for instance, it's at Yates Elementary, and 3 dates, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They usually try to have a weekend date. And then there are also, of course, Walgreens. There's the BCTC site across the street from us here. And then also the rapid testing is usually not quite as good if you have a negative result. If you have a positive result from the antigen testing, then that should mean that yes, you really do have COVID. I encourage you to get a PCR test rather than an antigen test. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I do think there are several places around town that are available, but you do have to search them out. Right now, most of them, you have to also call and find out whether an appointment's necessary, but many of them don't require an appointment. For instance, the ones at Yates Elementary later this week are just a walk up or drive through without appointment.
Dr. Humboldt, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Lyle. I apologize for getting on late, and good to talk to you all today. Keep up the good work. I
wanted people to know how difficult this is. We actually had people on the call last week from 43 different cities, okay, around the area. So they're all over.
Yeah.
So Fayette County doesn't
so
apply to everybody.
Give your health department, local health departments some support. I know you're doing that. Give them a pat on the back. They're working very, very hard to continue to try to slow the pandemic. And thank you for what you guys are doing too. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Take care.
100 cases a day, you can drop off, but I'm going to make this case. 100 cases a day and use average of 5 contacts. That's a lot of people to chase after. But getting that information is critical to helping control this pandemic, right?
It really is. And we also need people to, I think the important part of that comment is we need folks to be able to be honest with us when we give them a call and tell us who, where they were they at work, where did they work, who their close contacts are. Otherwise, then we struggle, especially with the businesses, to know who to contact in terms of the business contacts.
Getting employers to jump on the bandwagon and help with this is important. So when you have new cases at your office, you got to share it with your local health department so they can add it to the list and work those cases too. And encourage your employees to call them back and be honest and direct. And, this is the way we learn to control this thing. This is what other countries have had to do and places all over the nation have had to do. So we need to do a good job of it in Kentucky. Thanks for being on here. You have a great day. I think he's dropped. Okay, folks, I'm so glad we got him on. I'm sorry the timing wasn't perfect, but Jim, you were on a roll. Hop back on your slide here and wrap us up with some good information.
So I apologize to everyone for jumping around, and I apologize that I didn't get to the doctor quicker. When I'm presenting, it's difficult for me to see the notes, and they were trying to let me know he had gotten on. He had some technical difficulties, which we've all had on this call before, but that's my fault for not switching over. So I wanted to give you a couple of updates on Kentucky, and then I'm going to open it up to questions, and there have been several that I'll try to answer once I'm done with this slide. But wanted to let you know we've been promised new updates today on the KY COVID-19 website. That is I closed out of it. It's the website where this is coming from and where this is coming from that I was talking to the doctor about. I was trying to see if I can find, I don't think I can. But the KY COVID has 0 updates for employers since May 11th. And if you'll recall, one of the things that we've raised concerns about is the Healthy at Work officer. I would like to find out in the chat, how many of you right now actually do have still a designated Healthy at Work officer? I was going to put a poll up and I forgot to get it out in time. But I want to know how many of you, and don't lie about it, active, not just in name, active Healthy at Work officer that has the 14 steps that they have to verify are done every day. and that they're doing it all. I like the one that says it's me and I'd love to give it up. Yep. So what you're seeing is, okay, great. I am so thrilled all of you are doing it. I'm not thrilled at the lack of guidance that you've been given. It is important for you as an employer, from like what you just heard the doctor and Lyle indicate, it is critical for you to be doing this to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all of your employees. It also legally protects you from, hopefully, from a lawsuit because you weren't doing it. But the big thing is this, the reason why I asked you actively, emphasizing actively, I don't know how you can do your job, because what they did was throw out a whole bunch of you shall, 14 different things you shall do. They didn't answer any of the how, or what methodology you utilize, or what's the standard procedure for doing these things. So each one of you is literally flying blind with a list of 14 things that if you don't do, your business is not operating legally, but then there's no guidance to you about how do we fix this? What do we really need to do? And that's what, if you'll recall, Lyle and I reached out. Lyle, I think it had to be May the 14th, begging them. We actually wrote one for them and said, hey, how about you use this as a really ridiculously basic policy. Send it out. That way, if people meet this basic policy, they get some type of protection from you. And how about you put on your website, and he signed over 150 executive orders. Sign one that says, if a business does these 14 things and can show reasonable efforts, that they can't get sued. All it takes is a stroke of a pen. 150 of them have been signed by him, really, honestly, in the first 4 months. So it wouldn't have taken much to sign something. We want everybody to have a lot of flexibility, and we don't want to overstep, and it's like, please do, because all of you who just answered yes, and I hate it, I wish somebody would do it, if they had guidance on there, it would make your job a lot better. I won't say easier, but it's certainly a lot more comforting to know I've met the benchmark of whatever's required by my governor, instead of a vague, make sure you have all of these things done, and if you don't, then you can't open. That's a lot of pressure to put on an HR representative, and I feel for all of you, it's why we've been begging for something. I've been promised that we'll hear something today. They asked me which website I was looking at. I told them the one you've told us all to look at. They then said, okay, thank you, we'll get back to you. We're really hoping, I know they're overwhelmed, so this is not, I'm not dogging them. It's more of a frustration on your behalf, because I do think that it's time, after literally 4 months this week on the 11th, we'll have 4 months with zero guidance for businesses. You're still operating on the same exact guidance you got on May 11th for opening. Unless you're a restaurant, you went from 10 to 50 back to 10, now back up to 50 as long as you do social distancing. But outside of a restaurant that got a notice of shutdown at the end of July and reopening on August 10th, zero guidance for the rest of you. And honestly, at some point that becomes embarrassing. Let me put it to you this way. Let me put it in perspective. Businesses started to shut down on March the 9th, March 11th, let's put it. So it took 2 months to come out with the guidance for you to be able to reopen. From the beginning of this pandemic on March the 9th, March the 11th, whatever date Kentucky started to get its very first case. And it's taken 4 months since then, and we've not had any guidance. So 2 months for the guidance, 4 months, zero additional guidance since then. I'm really hoping that we have a lot of movement when we pointed out to them, this is what you said was, quote unquote, the definitive website for anyone in Kentucky. Go to this website. It's the most up-to-date, most awesome, best anywhere. Just keep going here. Well, now you have, and it's not changing, and that's the problem. All right, so the second one, sorry about the cursor on the screen. Give me a second. Turn it off. There we go. Second bullet on there. They're still recommending extra precaution. I wanted to show you this because it did change this morning. Literally, North Dakota popped on the screen after 7 o'clock, so somebody is actually testing this page and looking at it. I went to the Johns Hopkins, and I wanted to show you why it is that they don't have 10% anymore, but I can't find it. So give me a second on the KY COVID while I'm talking, and I'm going to drag it onto the screen for you. They don't want us going anywhere with 10% or more. Here it is, back to the page that never changes. By the way, if you want to see the schools, here's the schools, K through 12, college and university. That's the one that I just asked about. And I do want everybody to understand, I was complimenting Dr. Humbaugh, not criticizing, because Fayette County is the only one, in my opinion, that is accurately reporting, and he's responsible for that. So his reporting is awesome, and I love it. Not that we're the highest, but the fact that it's the most accurate. Be proud of your county if you're from Fayette. If you're not, go talk to your people. A couple of other things I want to point out. One, they changed the colors. You remember I told you that the colors were so ridiculously out because it made it look like the whole state was just turning dark burgundy, and it's a dark brown. It was just a god-awful, look how terrible everything is. They didn't change the numbers, though. They still stayed with over 400. They got rid of the maximum of 13,000 in Jefferson County. Over 400, though, makes it so that if you live in Bell County, you're equal to Fayette County. This is still, change it up, give us real information, and put the numbers back down so that we can see the numbers. They've removed the numbers. Now Fayette County looks like it's exactly the same as Bell County, and it doesn't really equal, so that information isn't very good. Here is the information that they have on their screen for the counties, but then if you go, or the states, if you go to the states themselves, wait, I want to back up and show you something, I'm sorry. They literally haven't changed this. It still says greater than 10% COVID positive testing. I'm going to make an editorial comment here. North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Mississippi, and Iowa are not your hotbeds of COVID-19. What they are is an extremely rural area where people don't get tested unless they have an active physical need to get tested. You don't drive to the local CVS because it might be 50 miles away. So you don't have people asymptomatic being tested very often. So the 10% from our mandate from the governor on travel is a problem. First of all, one, they're not following it. By looking at this, you would think, okay, I can't go to Iowa, Kansas, North or South Dakota, or Mississippi. But then if you look at it and you click on Johns Hopkins above 10%, the reason why we, I believe, are not including 10% is because Kentucky falls right there, 9.74%. We are at 10%, which means basically if we get a quarter of a point higher, y'all can't go to the grocery store and you'll have to self-quarantine because we're at 10%. That number needs to change. It's not accurate in terms of danger, and that's sending the wrong message. This one is not accurate. Puerto Rico's not 100%. That needs to be removed from Johns Hopkins. That's not our state's fault. But if we're going to rely on our state, North Dakota's at 19.58, that brand new. South Dakota's at 18, 18 for Kansas, Mississippi at 17, Iowa at 15, Idaho at 15, Missouri at 13.5, Florida's at 13.32, Nebraska's at 11.42, Nevada's at 11, Arkansas is at 11, South Carolina's at 11, Wisconsin's at 10.5, and we're next at 9.74. I only included Kentucky on our slide, going back to the slide, because I believe that's why we've deleted the 10%. That's why all of a sudden the travel guidance shows all of these that are over 15. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the 15 and even the 14, 13. Those are not high areas. So it all depends on how testing's being done, how often testing's being done. And honestly, we had a really good question this weekend at a family gathering, which was, so if somebody tests positive and then they go back for their retest, are they being included in the positive twice? So are they, when they go back and it's a positive test or a confirmed test, are they included? The other thing that's happened is I have a son who plays college athletics, and he told me a story about there's a whole school that shut down. I tried to find out whether it was Tennessee because they shut down their scrimmage, but there's a football team that they had tremendous number of positives, so they had to shut down everything, and then it turned out it was a negative. It was a false positive. Are those false positives, once they come back negative with the different type of test, being deleted? Or are we just adding in? I know the doctor today because honestly, that's just Fayette County, and that takes a lot of coordination between CVS and all the different organizations. But I do have a son two sons, had to be tested multiple times, one because of athletics and the other one because they thought he was positive. No positives, but he was tested 3 or 4 times. Does he show up 4 times in our results, or does he show up once? If you test positive and you have to retest every day until you're negative for 10 days, is that 10 positives? If you use a different testing method, is that 10 positives? The other thing that I think I raised last week, I won't put it on the screen, is Kentucky's recovery rate is ridiculously low compared to, if you look at the statistics on Johns Hopkins, like New York has a ridiculously high number, but then their recovery rate is very high. Florida has like a 95% recovery rate, very high. Kentucky's is like 10%. Everybody's sick and they stay sick. Something needs to change because I think the states are controlling the narrative in terms of illness rates, duplicity of test results, and when is somebody no longer, I know that some of those, because we've had the number up there since May, in fact, they've got to be ridiculously ill after 4 straight months of being sick. They've gotten better or they've died, but you can't have them just sit there and you're tested positive, but they haven't recovered. Otherwise, it's just insane how many people we have staying on the ill testing. It's a concern about the type of testing that we're doing. So that's the Kentucky. What I wanted to point out about Kentucky at the bottom is the important part. The guidance from Kentucky, remember we've talked about this for the last month, you have to take these considerations into consideration in allowing people to come back after they've gone to a dangerous location. I included all of them on the CDC website, down to 10%, and then Kentucky, because if you round off, we're in that too. Because even though our state has deleted it below 15% and limited it only to Iowa up, the reality is there's a whole lot of other states with a recommended quarantine from the governor. You have to continue to deal with this with your employees. So this is an ongoing issue until they change the COVID-19 page to get rid of 10%, move it to 15, or get rid of the travel ban or address it in whatever way that they need to address it. And so the only other thing I want to say is I got a message about Louisville. I wasn't picking on Louisville. What I was saying is there's no way 2 equal size colleges, one's showing 900. This is just a fact-based and it's also with Jefferson County Public Schools. If you're looking at a fact-based system and you're looking at the number of schools that are testing positive, I find it incredible that the University of Louisville only has 2 students. That's all. It's not I'm not picking on Louisville. This isn't a UK U of L. It's more of somebody needs to fix the reporting structure. So if that's out there, I apologize if somebody thought I was doing that backwards, attacking. Not trying to attack anyone. I actually, last week, you'll notice I was trying to pull that back up. They didn't even have Kentucky State University on there last week at all. I thought that was ridiculous that one of the larger ones was not even included. But these are the numbers that I'm concerned about. It's not a picking on any of this other than whoever it is that's responsible for reporting. I don't see how the University of Kentucky is 90%, 80% of the overall population, and that you've got schools on here that are literally reporting 0 or single digits. K-State, I can tell you that's the football team. They just now finally got their tests in. But, you know, the reality is, look across the board with all of the people. I'm going to pick on Kentucky for a second because you have number of new positives being 0 when campus now has people all over campus. I don't know where they're getting these statistics, but it says it's current as of September 5th. So this is not a bashing of an individual college. This is a bashing of our state reporting on the KY COVID website. The whole website is out of date. This is where I was talking about the 53,000 positive, 10,000 have recovered. That number really hasn't changed very much since April. So that's been my concern. All right.
Do you have any questions as we wrap up here?
Yes, we have had a couple of questions come in. So related to the CDC questionnaire that you showed us at the beginning, since Kentucky has different criteria for questioning than CDC, how do you reconcile the CDC and the state guidance?
You know, that's one of the best questions we've had. I don't know who did it, but I'm going to give you credit here. I'm going to move to the next slide so people can be writing this down. Nobody cares about question and answer slide. So while we're doing that, I'm going to leave that on the screen for everybody to write that down. That's one of the best questions. That again gets to the concern about our state website and whether it's up to date. It is not. And yet it says you should use the CDC website or our information. My recommendation to you is stick with the CDC questioning because it changes literally by the hour, 10 times a day. Try to keep up with it. Go to their frequently asked questions and use that. But they do have a guideline that is there for you to use. I would not use the state because as slowly and not carefully as we're updating some of it on our website on our state, you're better off to go with one that is a nationwide. That way you can say, look, I stuck to the CDC, EEOC, OSHA guidelines because remember, you could comply with state and still be in violation of OSHA if they have a different one, or EEOC if they have a different one. State is superseded unless it is more stringent. It is superseded by federal, which means federal is more important. Not CDC necessarily, but the OSHA, EEOC have all said, oh, go look at the CDC. Yep, we're going to adhere to the CDC. So honestly, I would, until they start updating it on a more regular basis and until I know who it is that's behind our state questionnaire, I would not trust the state. I just wouldn't. It doesn't seem like they have somebody updating it frequently enough.
Okay. And then do you have any detail on the proposed business liability shield?
Yeah, so the proposed business liability shield, we talked about all the way back when we talked about phase 5 at the beginning of or end of July, when we thought it was imminent that they would reach some kind of an agreement. I think that Congressman Barr also talked about this. I capitalized it in my presentation, but the reality of it is basically what they're trying to do is, and I've seen some commentary that I disagree heavily with, which is they're saying, oh, come on, nobody's really going to get sued for, you know, possibility of a customer getting COVID. And, you know, you'll have the ability to get out of it by showing that there's no way to trace it back to your facility, so you don't need a shield. Well, any of you who have had to pay an attorney by the hour to defend you on a lawsuit, even if it was the most ridiculous, frivolous, baseless lawsuit ever, I guarantee if there was some kind of shield, you wish you had it, because it will take a long time to get someone kicked out of court and a whole bunch of money paying an attorney to get someone kicked out of court on proving that they can't prove, or demonstrating to a judge they can't prove tracing back to us, because they could have gotten it at the Kroger, they could have gotten it at Walmart, they could have gotten it at the mom and pop or whatever. If there was a shield, basically what the shield is it bars a lawsuit from being filed, not from being filed, but being prosecuted. Basically what it says is you won't get sued for COVID-19 exposure claim from customers or from employees. Employees will only be able to go for workers' comp, and they'll only be able to report it through workers' comp, or they won't be able to report it at all. They will literally not be able to go after you. Now, whether or not this is in workers' comp field was all over the map, I don't believe it will be. What they're trying to do, though, is limit it. And then for customers, excluding any ability for a customer to sue an employer, sue a business. So if you think about it, without a shield, without protection, somebody could sue you and say, I came to Walmart last week and I got COVID. My wife got COVID, my whole family got COVID, my mom died, my dad died, and they sue you. And then you're into this big lawsuit about a wrongful death claim because you didn't take adequate measures to protect the employee, or the customer from potential exposure. Or someone breathed on me, someone coughed on me, someone intentionally did this in your store. You're responsible for it because you have to provide your customers a safe environment to shop in. A shield law would make it so that those people can't sue you. They can sue the person that directly did it to you, but they can't come after you. You don't have to expend money on a team of lawyers to protect you from a lawsuit from somebody saying, I walked in your store, I got sick, somebody died, and now I'm going after the deep pocket. Or I'm going after the mom and pop, and it shuts down your grocery store, your accounting office, your bourbon, if you have a bourbon distillery and you're doing tours, and somebody sues you because somebody on the tour was sick. I mean, all of these things are a nightmare to defend, and they cost a fortune. If the government comes in and says, we hereby declare, if you did the following things, you're immune from a lawsuit. That protects you straight up front. Can they still file a lawsuit? Yes. Anybody can file a lawsuit. You can't just bar it from being sued or filed. But then all you have to do is pay an attorney to pull out the COVID business liability shield law, whatever it's going to be called. They pull it out, they file a motion to dismiss, the judge looks at that and goes, well, yeah, dismisses it, case gone, versus having to go through all the depositions, all the proof, all of the evidence to find out, wait a minute, you can't prove that it was here. Well, now you've spent $100,000 on attorneys to try to keep you out of it. That's the difference between a shield law and people going, oh, come on, they'll never win that. Well, yeah, I've had those cases where there's no way anybody should ever win, and yet I've had to expend a tremendous amount of legal capital money on a case to get it kicked and have a client go, I cannot believe I just spent $25,000 on a case where the person was absolutely crazy. But the reality is, without that shield, that's what you're dealing with. That was one of the big pushes that Congressman Barr was talking about when he was on last, or his office was on. They're hoping to get into the law It's one that the House right now, the Democrat-led House, is adamant not to have a shield for businesses. They don't want any protection built in for any of the businesses. So that's the difference, and that's a little bit of an explanation. And yeah, I saw a note about the, there's also a concern right now of some of the local news outlets are reporting that you should stay away from travel with a 5% or above. And if you looked at that Johns Hopkins statistical chart, if I can find it again, the problem with that chart is, I think it's on this page. Yeah, somewhere. That chart, if you go 5% or above, the local media needs to wake up and realize that would include anyone outside of Vermont, which, by the way, is bad right now, but Vermont, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, DC, Arkansas, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Michigan. Michigan's shut down, so that's bizarre. New York shut down, New Jersey shut down. They have terrible results, but their positivity rate is because nobody can get tested unless you're believed to be positive. But everybody north or to the right of this line, which is the vast majority of states, you shouldn't be traveling. 32 states. So we either need to change it to 5% and nobody goes anywhere, shut down the country, or they need to get with what the governor's doing at 10%, and then the governor needs to get with his statistics and either list the 10% or, sorry, that went on the wrong screen, or go to the 15% that they have listed on their website right now. So that's the update on that. So all right, I had a question from someone saying we have a very small company. What documentation should we record for an employee using a sick day? If they bring anything to you from a treating medical care provider that indicates that they need to stay at home, they should self-quarantine, or if they answer any of your CDC or state questions that show that they possibly have a change in their circumstances, you should not have them come into work. You should not be requiring a tremendous amount, not just because you're small, but because CDC, EEOC, OSHA, and our state have all agreed that it's too much of a burden to put on an employee and the doctor to come in with a whole lot of documentation. You ask them for a simple sick note, a simple notification that they have a temperature or they have any of the questions answered the wrong way, let them have their sick day. What you need to do, though, is you need to document your sick leave so that you will have that cumulative effect under the EFMLEA so that when they run out of time, you don't have to continue paying them. Someone said that they're not allowed, that they've been told by an employee you can't force them to take a test because it's against their religion. Christian, one, I've never heard of that being against their religion, especially since it's not, even if they were not giving advice on the Christianity part of it, other than I don't believe that this is not an invasive, it's not a surgical procedure. They'd have to be like extraordinarily into particular sects, not the other. I heard some of you giggle, but they would have to be into one of those very rare, but yet this is not an invasive test, so I don't believe that they can qualify under that. And I don't believe that there's an exception to the EEOC right now that says you can, in fact, force all of your employees during a pandemic to take a test before they return to work. So you have a legitimate reason for not adhering to that. I will tell you that you need to be careful if someone pulls out their religion. You probably need to get guidance, legal. Sorry, Brad, I know that's not what you want to hear, but if somebody starts to threaten you with, I don't have to do this because of religion, sexual orientation, whatever it is, medical condition, otherwise, you can reasonably accommodate someone that has a medical condition so that they don't have to take the one that sticks up into their brain, other things. I use that sarcastically, but that's how it feels like. But if the EEOC has not come out, and I have not seen one, giving an exception to the CDC mandate and governor mandate that you must test people if there's any concerns, and that you must protect the rest of them, and that you have the absolute right to test people before they come back, I feel pretty good about that. But as soon as I hear an employee individually threatening you with, you can't do this because of my religion, I would get a legal written guidelines so that if you ever get sued, you can go after the attorney's malpractice. Little hint. I don't know of any exceptions, so just be careful on that, but that's that. Anything else?
Allison?
Yeah, we've got one that just says if the quick test isn't as accurate, how can we discourage employees from using that type of test? So I think
I don't know that you can discourage people from taking the quick test. The CDC has come out with the description of the different types of tests, but they have not said which test employers should or should not allow, with the exception of, again, I know this is plowing new ground, but if there's anyone on this that didn't hear this before, do not allow the test to be a genome test for an employer. That is illegal. EEOC came out after the CDC had those as one of the recommendations. This should be an active test only, not something that shows that your genetics show that you used to have it, that you might have an antibody built up or anything, because if you do any genetic testing, that falls under the GINA Act. So they came out with an express declaration. Employers cannot, under any circumstance, utilize that type of testing. Just a little blast from the past that we haven't covered in a few weeks. Just keep that in the back of your mind. If you hear genome, genetic, don't do that kind of testing. Don't accept that kind of testing from your employee. You know, I have not seen anything yet. What do you do if an employee shows up and says, here's my test, I'm allowed to go to work, and you realize it's a genetic test? Can you accept that test but then tell them I can't look at it? I don't know. All I know is you cannot rely on that test. So I guess my answer would be, I do know, although it seems kind of silly if you're not looking at the genetic part of it. Flat 100% directive from the EEOC, you can't rely on it. So if they come in with a genetic, I guess you're going to have to tell them, go back, try again, go get the one that's not the genetic test. I'm not allowed to rely on it. Now, what do you do in the interim? You might let that person work. I'm not positive as to the legality of that because, again, we have zero guidance out there on that issue. So, what's my recommendation for non-COVID related situations which could qualify for FMLA? Should we still insist on FMLA certification from a physician? Yes. Or if they bring in a doctor's note stating to be off of work for a week, is that sufficient? No. The only time that I've seen a difference is when it relates to COVID, FMLA under the FFCRA, that expansion of FMLA is where we received the directive that said, loosen your restrictions on what you require and what type of documentation. It appeared to be directed toward EFMLEA under the FFCRA. They did not go back under FMLA and say, loosen your restrictions across the board. You still have the opportunity and in fact the obligation as an employer under FMLA. Not only do you have the authority to have follow-up questions, I will tell you, don't be a stickler if the doctor says, I don't have time to sit down for an interview with you. I'll fill out the following. If they don't put it on their letterhead, if they don't put it on a formal letter, but they send you the information you need, don't be the one that gets sued because you required it to be on the formal letter and somebody pulls out the COVID-19 lifting of restrictions on doctors. But do keep in mind, you have the authority and the obligation, two things. One, you can follow up question on a doctor's note to make sure that you can reasonably accommodate without additional expense. I guess I got 3 or 4 things. Number 2, under COVID, because of financial constraints on the employer, they are allowing different kinds of reasonable accommodations, but if your business is doing well enough, you have to start going back to the old accommodations, expensive and so on. But there was EEOC guidance that said, hey, we understand everybody's hurting right now, including employers. So if it's too expensive, you can figure out stopgap measures, Band-Aids, other things that can be used instead of like a standing desk at home, those types of things, but you still have to do those. The third thing is you still have an obligation, even if somebody's remote working. I know we've covered these things before, but the question being asked, I want to make sure we cover it all. Under FMLA, if an employee says to you, you know, I'm really having trouble with my mental health and I'm really depressed and it's really impacting me, you have an obligation if an employee hints to you, I use that just because remote working people may be going through that, employee follow-up questions to see whether they are entitled to FMLA leave. You can't just take their information and go, well, they didn't click that magical box and ask for FMLA, I don't have to give it to them. So always keep in mind, as an employer, as an HR specialist, you have an obligation to have some follow-up questions if somebody drops something on you where FMLA might come into play. You know, gee, my daughter's, you know, out of school. You have an obligation to go, yeah, you might be entitled to EFML-EA. Let's have some follow-up questions. Is the school closed? Are they doing remote work only? You know, go back through all the questions that we've talked about before. It's your affirmative obligation to follow up. You can't sit with your head in the sand and act like you didn't know because they didn't ask the magical question.
All right. That cover
Sorry,
all?
I went a lot there, but we had a lot of questions on that.
Absolutely. Anything else, Allison?
Nope, I think we've got them all.
All right. Brad, thanks for joining us today. Jim, as always, thanks for covering all that great stuff. Allison, Autumn, and Chase, thank you for helping out. I think we're going to open it up for just a minute and see if anybody wants to chat.
So yeah, if Chase will have to make it so that everybody can unmute themselves.
I keep trying this idea and you all keep telling me nobody wants to talk, and that's kind of what it looks like. Hey, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and be delighted to take your questions personally. Deb or Sam or Melinda, do you have comments?
Brad and Allison, great job. Thank you for the information.
All right. Nobody wants to speak up? That's okay. Everybody ready to sign off? Thank you all very much. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Talk next week.
Thank you all.